Hi, welcome back to Ahead of the Curve. I'm your host, Dr. Megan Teed. It has been a while since I've seen you. Today, I'm going to be talking about my trip to Australia, giving you some words of wisdom, things I learned along the way that will hopefully save you some headaches and backaches. I just want to start off by giving you a little bit of a life update. Since the last time I was on here, we have had a holiday, a new year. It's 2025 and a couple weeks into it. And right after we got back from our trip to Australia, we immediately got a puppy. So that is something new and exciting that's going on in our world right now. Puppy training is not for the faint of heart. We really felt like we had things handled pretty well, under control. And, we got him home and he slept through the night in the crate. And the past couple nights, he's been waking up and kind of barking and crying to go out. So hopefully, like, not to say I want him to have a digestive thing going on, but hopefully it is just a digestive thing and not something that is a new habit. Waking up at, you know, 12 o'clock, 2 o'clock is really disruptive to sleep. And I know if you have children, you're probably rolling your eyes at me. But this is as close as I can relate to that. But he is a lot of fun. His name is Garen. Our last name is Teed, if you didn't know that. So he is guaranteed. And he is a corgi and Australian Shepherd mix. So a lot of fun. He has one blue eye and one like marbled brown eye. So he has some neat little characteristics about him. He's a lot of fun. Um, and then, yeah, I have been to Australia since I've updated you last. I did do an episode with Carrie, but if you didn't get the chance to listen to that, you haven't really heard anything about my trip. Um, it was 2 weeks long and quite an adventure. Our plan was to fly into Sydney and then we did a road trip to Melbourne or Melbourne as they say it, and we decided to drive the coastline to get there. So, um, it took us about 7 days to drive the coastline, and it was wonderful, scary, driving on the other side of the road. Thankfully, Mark took the reins with that, and he did all the driving. Wrong side of the road, wrong side of the car, roundabouts are backwards. Everything is opposite there. Like, even walking on the sidewalk, you have to well, you don't have to, but you should walk on the left side or you're gonna just bump into people the whole time. And by the time I actually was consistent with that, it was time to go, and then I got back to the States, and I was still walking on the left side in the airports. So, it took me a little bit to get adjusted with that, but, overall, it was a wonderful trip. Got to one of the highlights of the trip was getting to meet a client of mine who I've been working with for about 4 years, and I've only known her through the screen, through virtual, sessions. She lives a couple hours north of Sydney. She and her daughter came down, and I got to meet her in person, and that was just surreal to actually see her in the flesh and give her a hug, and, that's just one of the joys of the work that I get to do is meeting people from all around the world and actually getting to meet people in person and sitting down with them. You become friends with them after a while, and, that was really special and neat to get to do that. And, we another highlight was getting to go to this area in Meitung where they have hot springs and cold springs and sauna, and we got to spend the day there exploring. It's all outside. It's kind of a nature trail that you walk through, and then you're in these little barrels and you're looking over the ocean and the mountains in the background, and it's just very serene, and it was nice to get away and get outside of the United States and explore a different culture. Um, but the process of getting there, that was a challenge. Um, I've learned how much of a control freak I am through that trip in several different ways that you'll hear about. And just I got to experience firsthand again some of the challenges of traveling with a curvy spine. And I'm looking forward to sharing those with you. So, we arrived in Sydney about 20 plus after 20 plus hours of traveling, and my check bag did not, unfortunately. And if you follow me on Instagram, I was really detailed in the way that I was packing, trying to be super prepared for my back and any situation. Thankfully, I had a few things in a carry on that I was using on the plane that were super helpful. So that was my gorgeous ball, and I alternated between sitting on that and having it at my low back. I had my yoga tune-up balls, which are like the firmer balls that I could pin in between my back and the seat and do some like self myofascial release on that long, long flight. Um, and then I was also using the gorgeous ball in a little bit of a different way where I wedged it in between my right rib cage and the armrest, just as kind of a block or a prop so that I wasn't falling into my curve. It was kind of pushing me out of my curve um, into a better positioning, and it was a bit more comfortable. But honestly, so our flight from LA to Sydney was 15 and a half hours. And we were in coach, and there I what do they call that now? Basic economy? I think that's what they call it now. We were in basic economy, and I swear when I flew international last, I don't remember the seats being that small, but it was no different than a domestic flight. Legroom, super squished. Thankfully, the girl that was sitting next to me, she was giving me some space, and then Mark was on my other side, so I could lean into him a little bit if I needed to. But, yeah, it's just a situation where you can't really stretch your legs out, and then I was in the middle seat, thankfully well, I did this on purpose. I had Mark be the aisle seat so he could have more space, but I could just make him get up whenever I needed to get up, which was more than I would if a stranger was sitting there. So, anyway, kinda going back to, getting to Sydney, I was pretty stressed when I got there and my bag wasn't there because in 3 days, we were going to be taking this road trip. So, if my bag didn't get there before we left for our road trip, I had no idea what I was going to do. So just let's go through some of my key takeaways from my trip. The first one is not all Scully tools are travel friendly. And one of those tools are the rice bags. And I knew this from the get go that if you don't get a particular kind of filling for your scoliosis wedges, they get flagged if you're going and taking it as a carry-on through TSA. So you should put those in your checked bag, which I did. So they didn't arrive. And then the other thing that I was super excited about before we left was the fact that I found these travel pull up rings that we could use for elongations. And Mark had enough space in his carry on to put the rings in there. He didn't check a bag, and he was just giving me more space in my checked bag so that I wouldn't have to shove those in there. So unfortunately, TSA had no clue what those rings were, and they got flagged every spot that we had to go through security with, and he had to pull them out, and they're like, "What the heck are those things?" And I was like, "Yeah, they're to do pull-ups and elongations, like, I have a, thing going on with my back," and they're like, "Oh, okay," like, they got it after a while, but they just, like, pulled them out, and they looked like huge handcuffs. They probably thought that they were something super strange, or a weapon, but they anyway, so we got them through security, and then once we got to our Airbnbs, what I didn't think about or realize with a different place was only one no, sorry, only 2 out of the 7 places that we stayed when we were in Australia, I could use those rings with. So it was totally pointless to bring them. They need a molding that goes over the door in order to work because the way the rings work, it's basically, a pressure type of clamp that needs to be hooked onto the wood molding. If it doesn't have the molding, then it'll just slide right off. And that was the case with most of the places that we stayed, unfortunately. But, thankfully I had alternatives. But knowing what I know now, I wouldn't have even bothered to pack those. They're better, I would say, for like a road trip if you don't want to bring your actual pull up bar, you know, a domestic flight if you, know what the situation and the setup's going to be like where you're staying at, then I would recommend bringing those. But thankfully, I had my yoga strap and I could do some elongations, putting the yoga strap over top of the door, straddling the door, doing the elongations that way. And then I also used them over a doorknob and did my knees and elbows breathing that way. Um, but yes, so that was a huge bummer because I was extremely excited about that. My next lesson that I learned was just to focus on some small wins when you're traveling. You're not on your usual routine, your regular schedule. So, my time for actual dedication to Scoli exercises was pretty limited. What I ended up doing was picking just one thing per day to prioritize, whether that was breathing, elongation, or release work. Um, Only a few days that I really managed to squeeze in all 3 of those things, but it's just a really good reminder that it doesn't have to be perfect, your routine doesn't have to be perfect, in order for it to be effective. So, just choosing one thing worked really well, it kept my back pretty happy throughout our travels. I would roll up my feet at the end of the day using the yoga tune-up ball pretty much every day because we did a ton of walking. And then I got a little bit more specific with some of the release work and did my elongations pretty regularly, and breathing was less frequent. I will say that my breathing helped me a ton on the flight when I was literally just losing my mind on the flight. You just kind of get to this point where you're like, "Okay, I'm ready to get up," but, I'll tell you a little bit more about that in my coming win. So my third win was staying active however you can while you're traveling. And that depends on the trip that you're taking, what kind of vacation you're on or holiday you're on. We did a lot of walking, exploring, and I tried as best as I could to get up as early as possible because the time difference was so hugely different from the States. I was trying to stay kind of close to as I'm yawning, I'm talking about being tired, I'm yawning. I tried to stay as close as possible to the same time zone, but that was pretty challenging. So I would get up pretty early, try to go for runs, and that was kind of a double bonus. I got to explore and see some things that I normally wouldn't have seen hadn't I like gotten lost, going on these runs. We stayed in a lot of beautiful places that were right along the water. So they would have most of the places had like a little bit of a trail or a walking path that I could run on in order to get to see some new sights. Um, but I would say I really just focused on moving as much as I could, looked for movement opportunities when I could. So instead of taking an escalator, taking the stairs, instead of taking the tram or the train. When we were in a city, we would walk, when I didn't have blisters on my feet. I mean, there's so many things that were obstacles along the way, but, and I even was able to do Pilates a few days, and then I had access to a gym, at the end of our trip when we were in Melbourne. So my takeaway from that is consistency is better than perfection. So if I had gotten, caught up in making sure everything was perfect or the conditions were perfect, I probably wouldn't have done much of anything. So anyway, just do what you can, be as active as you can, and your back will thank you. And my last takeaway is just that long flight. Long flights are no joke. And I am thankfully a fairly pain-free person when it comes to my back. And I was just, about to crawl out of my skin by the end of that flight to Australia. And I think that that would be the case for anybody who has a body. Like, doesn't matter if you have scoliosis or not. Sitting for 20 plus hours cumulatively is terrible. It's just not the greatest. And my back actually held up better than my butt. My tailbone was just feeling bruised and almost kind of felt like I was getting a pressure sore when I didn't have my Coregus ball. But thankfully, like it was just getting sore, so I would pull that out and sit on the Coregus ball. I had it deflated almost completely. There's like a puff of air in it, and I would sit on that. And then I would take that out and I would put it behind my back for a little bit of time. Uh, that just helped a lot to take the pressure off. And then as far as like when my back was feeling really compressed, I did my 360 breathing as my like natural spine decompressor because I was using my lungs and my diaphragm. And basically, like as you're inflating more and more and more, it's decompressing that spine more and more and more. And that was pretty great. I did it just sitting upright. I did it in this position with my feet flat on the floor and my elbows resting on my knees, like you would do if you were kind of like slouching down and looking at your phone. So the only difference is you're not slouching, you're trying to keep your spine nice and as straight as possible on an incline and your head in line with your spine there. And then you do your expansive breathing in that position. So while I was doing that, I even like felt like a couple little like pops along the way, and it just felt nice to have that tool and have that resource so that I wasn't just sitting there about to cry. I can't imagine, even not having scoliosis, how just frustrating and uncomfortable that flight would have been. Much more frustrating and uncomfortable that flight would have been if I didn't have those tools. And I got up as much as I could for Mark, interrupted sleep a bunch, but, yeah, I think it definitely paid off. So, yeah, this trip was a reminder that even with the best plans, you need to be flexible and adapt to the unexpected. And I'm grateful for the experience and the lessons that I learned, both about traveling with scoliosis and about myself. My control freak tendencies were brought to the forefront, especially with that lost bag. So, for anyone managing scoliosis, whether traveling or staying home, remember it's not about doing everything perfectly, but it's finding ways to keep moving and prioritizing what's most important in the moment. That is all I have for you today. Um, if you have any travel tips that you'd like to share, please do shoot me an email or shoot me an Instagram message. I'd love to hear from you. I love when I do hear from you. If you are interested in working with me in a small group capacity, I'm doing a little revamp, a big revamp of my small group coaching program, the Scoliosis Strength Collective, starting in March. So make sure you get on the wait list. I will have that link in the show notes so that you can get on the wait list, get all the details, and I will have some special incentives for people who sign up early and who are on the wait list. So make sure you check that out. Thanks for tuning in again. It was great to be back. Um, I know I had a little hiatus, but I needed some time to focus on my health and caring for myself the best as possible. Until next time, stay well and stay ahead of the curve.